The great meeting hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with hundreds of different voices. Creatures from across the galaxy sat in their special chairs, each one designed for their unique bodies. Some breathed air, others needed water tanks, and a few floated in energy fields. All of them were here for one reason. They wanted to talk about the empty space that used to belong to someone else. Admiral Vextar stood at his speaking platform. His four eyes scanned the room with confidence. He was tall, with crystal-like skin that caught the light. His people, the hegemony, were the strongest military force in the galaxy. At least that's what everyone believed. The Terran sector remains silent, Vextar announced. His voice had a metallic ring that made it sound cold. We have sent messages. We have tried to make contact. No one answers. The entire region seems empty. A nervous energy filled the room. The younger delegates shifted in their seats. They had heard stories, but stories were just stories. The older ones stayed calm, but their eyes showed they remembered things the young ones did not. Humans, whispered Delegate Zixara. Her body was made of living crystal that shimmered when she was scared. My great-grandmother told me about them. They walked on two legs like some of you. They were aggressive. They called themselves the Terran Empire once. Vextar laughed, but it was not a happy sound. Old tales, children's stories. Our science teams have searched that area for years. No technology signals, no ships, no life signs. Whatever lived there died long ago. But then High Counselor Mordun stood up slowly. He was very old, even for his long-lived species. When he spoke, everyone listened. His voice carried the weight of many centuries. I was young when we last saw a human ship. That was over 400 years ago. They just vanished. Some people think they went back to their home world. Others believe they became pure energy or something like that. But those of us who lived through those times know the truth. The room became completely quiet. Even Vextar stopped his proud posturing. The old counselor's words had power. They are sleeping, Mordun continued. His ancient eyes reflected memories of old fears. And sleeping dragons are the most dangerous kind. Vexitar's ambition burned brighter than his caution. The Terran sector had 17 star systems. It had 43 worlds where his people could live. It had enough resources to fuel hegemony expansion for the next 1,000 years. Old stories would not stop him from claiming what he wanted. We will vote, he declared. All in favor of taking control of the Terran sector, raise your hands. The vote was closer than Vextar expected. Many delegates remembered the old warnings, but greed won over wisdom. The hegemony would get permission to invade human space. As the meeting ended and delegates began to leave, none of them noticed something important. A small probe hung at the edge of their solar system. It had been recording everything. The probe had markings that no living creature had seen for hundreds of years. Markings that once belonged to the Terran Empire. Far away, on a blue planet that circled a yellow star. Deep underground bunkers began to wake up. Lights that had been dark for 4 centuries started to glow. Computer systems that had been sleeping began to hum with life. Alarms started ringing for the first time in 400 years. Commander Jae Sung sat in his command chair, reading reports that his automated systems had been gathering. His dark hair was starting to show gray, but his eyes were sharp and alert. He had been born on this world, as had his parents and grandparents. His family had been waiting for this day for generations. Sir, said Lieutenant Bora from her station. The probe network confirms it. The Galactic Council has authorized hegemony forces to enter our territory. They're calling it annexation. Jae Sung nodded calmly. Expected timeline for their arrival? Based on their fleet movements, approximately 6 weeks. They're assembling quite a force. 27 heavy cruisers, 48 mining vessels, and support ships. Impressive, Jae Sung said with a slight smile. They're taking this seriously. What do our deep scans show about their technology level? Chief Engineer Minsu looked up from his displays. About where we were 600 years ago, sir. They've made some interesting improvements to energy distribution, but nothing we haven't seen before. Any sign they know we're here? None, sir. They still think we're extinct. The Ghost Protocol is holding perfectly. Jae Sung stood and walked to the main display. It showed the entire Terran sector with human settlements marked in blue and the approaching hegemony fleet in red. Each blue dot represented millions of his people, living quiet lives on worlds the galaxy thought were empty. Recommendations from the Defense Network? Standard package, sir, reported Tactical Officer Haywan. Let them get deep enough into our space that retreat becomes difficult, then demonstrate why disturbing sleeping humans is a bad idea. Casualties? Minimal? To none on their side if we do this right. We're not monsters, sir. We're just very good at what we do. Jae-sung nodded. 400 years ago, humanity had made a choice. They could have conquered the entire galaxy. Their technology had advanced to the point where resistance would have been impossible. Their fleets could have swept across every inhabited system within years, but they realized they were becoming something they didn't like. They were conquering because they could, and they were enjoying it too much. So they stepped back. They retreated to their core worlds and built defenses that could protect them, while they figured out who they really wanted to be. Sir, Bo-Ra called out. We're receiving updated intelligence from our monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. The hegemony isn't the only power interested in expansion. The Merchant Coalition is eyeing the Outer Rim territories. The scientific collective is pushing into unexplored regions. Everyone thinks the galaxy is theirs for the taking. Natural enough, Jae-sung replied. We left a power vacuum when we withdrew. Someone was bound to try filling it eventually. Orders, sir? Jae-sung looked at the tactical display one more time. The hegemony fleet was already moving, confident in their strength, certain of their victory over empty worlds. They had no idea that every move they made was being watched, analyzed, and prepared for. Activate the defense networks, bring all systems to ready status, and send a message to Colonial Command. Tell them the ghost stories are about to become very real. As his crew began their preparations, Jae-sung allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Humanity had spent 4 centuries learning to be better than their aggressive ancestors. But they had also spent that time preparing for the day when someone would test their resolve. That day had finally come. Admiral Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's Pride. Through the massive viewing window, he could see his entire fleet spread out in perfect formation. 27 heavy cruisers, their hulls gleaming with weapons and armor. 48 mining ships ready to strip entire worlds of their resources. Hundreds of support vessels carrying troops, supplies, and equipment. This was the largest military force the hegemony had assembled in 50 years. Vextar felt proud as he watched his ships move through space like a metal storm. Soon, he would be the admiral who gave his people 17 new star systems. The High Council would have to promote him after a victory this great. Sir, we are approaching the outer edge of the Terran sector, reported his navigation officer. Her voice was steady and professional. All ships are maintaining formation. Excellent, Vextar replied. He turned to his tactical officer. What? Do your scanners show? Initial scans confirm our intelligence reports, sir. Rich asteroid belts full of valuable minerals. 2 gas giants with atmospheres we can harvest. 3 planets in the habitable zone that our people can colonize. No technology signatures detected anywhere in the system. Perfect. Vextar smiled, showing his sharp crystalline teeth. The humans, if they ever truly existed, are clearly long gone. This will be easier than we thought. The fleet moved deeper into the system. Every ship was on high alert, but the scanners showed nothing but empty space and valuable resources. The crews began to relax. This would be a simple mission, not a battle. Then the communications officer looked up from her station with confusion on her face. Sir, I'm receiving a transmission. Vextar's 4 eyes narrowed. His intelligence reports had been very clear. No inhabited systems for 20 light-years in any direction. From where? The transmission appears to be very old, sir. It seems to be some kind of automated message beacon. Put it through to the bridge speakers. Static filled the air, followed by a voice speaking in the ancient trade language. The words were clear despite the age of the recording. The tone was flat and emotionless like a computer speaking. This is Terran Defense Network Station Alpha 7. You have entered restricted space. You have 30 standard minutes to reverse course. This is your only warning. Silence fell over the bridge. Several junior officers looked at each other nervously. But Vextar's laugh broke the tension like glass shattering. An old recording, he said with amusement. Some ancient defense system still playing back messages from its long-dead masters. How pathetic they must have been, relying on empty threats instead of real weapons. Continue on course. But his sensor operator's voice cracked with fear. Sir, I am detecting energy signatures. Multiple contacts appearing on all sides. They are powering up. The main tactical display suddenly exploded with new information. Defense platforms that had been invisible moments before were now showing up everywhere. They looked like they had been carved from asteroids, perfectly camouflaged. Until they activated, energy readings that had been 0 were now showing power levels that made their biggest warships look small. How many? Vextar demanded, his confidence starting to crack. I count over 200, sir, but more keep appearing. It's like they were always there, just sleeping. The ancient beacon's voice returned, but now it had something that sounded almost like excitement. Warning period expired. Welcome to the Terran Defense Network. Please hold for immediate customer service. What happened next was not really a battle. It was more like a very precise demonstration. The defense platforms moved with perfect coordination. Their weapons fired in patterns that looked almost like art, if art could be made from pure destruction. But the platforms did not try to destroy the hegemony ships. That would come later if needed. Instead, they disabled them with surgical precision. Every shot hit exactly where it needed to hit. Engines were knocked out but not exploded. Weapon systems were shut down but not destroyed. Life support remained intact, but navigation and communication were completely disabled. The crews were left alive but helpless, drifting in space while their ships were systematically analyzed and cataloged by scanning beams they could not identify. Admiral, Vextar watched in growing horror as his entire fleet was neutralized in less than 20 minutes. Ships that had conquered a dozen star systems were torn apart by technology his people could not even classify. Not destroyed, but completely helpless. Sir, his communications officer whispered, I am receiving another transmission. From the defense network? No, sir, from the third planet in this system. It is using our own communication frequencies somehow. And sir, it is not a recording. Someone is actually speaking to us. The voice that filled the bridge was warm and alive. It spoke perfect hegemony standard with just a trace of an accent that sounded both ancient and familiar. Hegemony vessels, this is Commander Junho of the Terran Colonial Defense Force. Your invasion fleet has been neutralized. Your crews are unharmed but are now prisoners of war. We will begin towing operations within the hour. I suggest you prepare your people for processing. Vextar found his voice, though it shook with disbelief. Impossible. Your species is extinct. This has to be some kind of trick. The laugh that came back was entirely too human. It was the laugh of someone who was genuinely amused. Extinct, Admiral? We have been watching you for centuries. We know about your expansion plans, your politics, your technology, your weaknesses. We have been waiting for someone to work up the courage to knock on our door. There was a pause. We have been getting rather bored, actually. As the first massive human vessels began to appear from what their sensors had classified as empty space, Admiral Vextar realized something terrible. Every ghost story he had ever heard about humans was about to become a living nightmare. The ships that emerged were unlike anything in his database. They seemed to bend light around themselves, making them hard to look at directly. They moved without any visible engines, yet achieved speeds that should have been impossible. And they were big, much bigger than his flagship. Admiral, Commander, Junho's voice continued. You and your people will be treated according to standard prisoner protocols. Your ships will be repaired and returned to you eventually. But first, we need to have a serious conversation about boundaries and the consequences of waking up sleeping neighbors. The transmission ended, leaving Vextar staring at his tactical display in complete shock. In less than an hour, his great invasion fleet had become a collection of disabled ships being herded by creatures that were supposed to be extinct. The ghost stories, it seemed, had teeth. Admiral Vextar sat in a chair that had been specially made for his body type. The room around him was surprisingly comfortable, nothing like the torture chambers he had expected. Across from him sat a human female who had introduced herself as Colonel Ha-Yun. She was smaller than the ancient stories had described. The legend spoke of humans as giants among the stars. But this woman looked almost delicate, yet there was something in her dark eyes that made Vextar feel very small. Those eyes held depths of experience that made his own centuries of life seem insignificant. "Your technology," Vextar said, unable to hide his curiosity despite being a prisoner. "It should not be possible. Our best scientists believe that any species with such advanced abilities would have transcended physical existence long ago." Ha-Yun smiled, and somehow that expression managed to be both pleasant and terrifying at the same time. "Transcendence is overrated. Besides, we tried that once. We did not like it very much." "You tried what exactly?" "About 500 years ago, a group of our people decided that having physical bodies was a weakness. They uploaded their minds into a vast digital network, convinced they had achieved perfect existence." She paused to drink from a cup that smelled poisonous to Vextar's senses. "It took them about 50 years to beg us to let them back into real bodies. It turns out that consciousness without the ability to be genuinely surprised, to make real discoveries, to actually grow and change, is not consciousness at all. It is just very sophisticated data storage." Vextar's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, showing his deep confusion. "But your disappearance from galactic affairs—" "We did not disappear," Ha-Yun corrected gently. "We stepped back. There is an important difference. You see, Admiral, about 4 centuries ago, we reached a point where we could have conquered the entire galaxy. Our technology had advanced far enough that resistance would have been impossible. Our expansion had given us the resources to build fleets that could have swept across every inhabited system within 10 years. Then why did you not do it?" The human's expression became thoughtful, almost sad. "Because we realized we were becoming monsters. We told ourselves we were bringing peace, order, and civilization to the galaxy, but the truth was simpler and much uglier. We were conquering because we could, and we were enjoying it far too much." She stood and walked to a window that showed the disabled hegemony fleet being carefully towed by human vessels. "My ancestor, Admiral Minho, wrote in his final report that a species capable of conquering everything lacks the wisdom to rule anything. So we made a choice. We pulled back to our homeworlds, built our defense networks, and decided to see what the galaxy would do without us pushing everyone around. And what did you discover? That given enough time, someone always comes looking for us." Ha-Yun's smile returned, but now it had an edge that made Vextar's crystalline skin crawl. "Usually someone who thinks they are the new apex predator. Someone who needs to be reminded that there are older, more dangerous things sleeping in the dark corners of space." A soft sound indicated an incoming message. Ha-Yun activated a display that showed the bridge of another human vessel. A male officer appeared, his face showing the calm professionalism that seemed universal among these creatures. "Colonel, this is Commander Dong-Hyun aboard the Resolute. We have completed our analysis of the hegemony fleet. Their technology is approximately equivalent to where we were 600 years ago, but they have developed some interesting innovations in energy distribution that our engineers would like to study. Your recommendations? Standard package. Disable their production capabilities in their home systems, establish monitoring stations, and implement a technology development cap. Give them about 50 years to think about their choices, then we can reassess their threat level." Ha-Yun nodded. "Approved. What is the status of our rapid response protocols?" "All colonial worlds have been notified. Defense networks are fully online for the first time since the withdrawal. The Council is excited, Colonel. It has been a long time since we have had a proper situation to manage." After the transmission ended, Vextar stared at the human in dawning horror. "Your entire civilization has been waiting for us. Not just you, Admiral. Anyone who thought they could claim what belongs to us. You see, we never really left the galaxy. We just learned to be very, very quiet." Ha-Yun returned to her seat and looked at him with eyes that seemed to see straight through him. "But now you have woken us up. And we are going to need to have a serious conversation with your galactic council about boundaries, respect, and the consequences of disturbing sleeping neighbors. She leaned forward slightly. I hope they are more reasonable than you were. Vextar felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. What will you do to us? You and your crews will be returned to your people unharmed. Your ships will be repaired and sent back as well. But your government will receive a very clear message about what happens to those who threaten human territory. And if they do not listen? Ha'un's smile became something that would haunt Vextar's dreams. Admiral, what you experienced today was our greeting. We used less than 1% of our actual defensive capabilities. We have spent 4 centuries building, improving, and preparing. We have technologies that your scientists could not understand if we spent decades explaining them. And we have had time to become very, very good at warfare. She stood again and walked to another display showing star charts. Your hegemony controls 43 star systems. Impressive by current galactic standards. Do you know how many systems humanity controls? Vextar shook his head. Neither do we. We stopped counting at 3,000, and that was 2 centuries ago. The room fell silent except for the gentle hum of the ship's systems. Vextar tried to process what he was hearing. 3,000 systems. No wonder they had been able to field such overwhelming defensive capabilities. But we learned something important during our expansion, Ha'un continued. Controlling territory is not the same as ruling it wisely. Power without restraint leads to corruption, so we chose restraint. We chose to protect rather than to conquer. You could have ruled the galaxy. We did rule the galaxy, Admiral, for about 50 years, and we were terrible at it. Her expression became serious, but we are very good at defending it. And now that someone has forced us to become active again, we will make sure that the galaxy remains a place where different species can coexist peacefully. Or else they will discover why humans became the subject of ghost stories in the first place. As if summoned by her words, the display activated again. This time, it showed dozens of human ships moving through space with impossible grace. They seemed to phase in and out of normal reality, appearing and disappearing like phantoms. Your people will see us now, Ha'un said quietly. The age of hiding is over, but whether they see us as protectors or as something to fear will depend entirely on their choices. Vextar watched the ships on the display and realized that his invasion had not just failed. It had awakened something that the galaxy was not prepared for. The ghost stories were real and they had just become the galaxy's new reality. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in recent history. Representatives from dozens of species filled the great chamber, their various forms creating a chaos of fear, anger, and confusion. At the center of it all, displayed on the massive viewing screens were the images that had shattered 4 centuries of peace. The hegemony fleet, once the pride of their military, now drifted helplessly in space, while sleek human vessels moved between them like hunters circling their prey. But even more disturbing were the other images. Massive structures were emerging from what had been thought to be empty space around every system that bordered the old Terran territories. Defense platforms that made space stations look tiny, their weapon readings showing power levels that made no sense. High Counselor Morden stood at the central speaking platform. His ancient body trembled, but not with age. It shook with a fear that reached back across centuries of memory. The humans have returned to active galactic affairs, he announced. His voice carried clearly despite its weakness. As I feared, our invasion of their territory has been seen as an act of war. War? Representative Kylvin of the Merchant Coalition rose from his seat. His cybernetic parts flashed with agitation. This is not war. This is extermination. My trade scouts report that every shipping lane within 50 light-years of Terran space has been sealed. Our vessels are being turned back by ships that appear from nowhere and vanish just as quickly. Counselor Zerath from the Scientific Collective added her own frightening news. Our deep space observatories have detected massive energy signatures moving through hyperspace. We believe they are ships, but they operate on principles we cannot identify. They are achieving speeds that should be impossible with any known technology. Ambassador Quiron of the Peaceful Unity tried to offer hope. His melodious voice carried optimism that his words could not support. Perhaps we could attempt diplomatic contact. Surely they can be reasoned with. All intelligent species can be reasoned with. Morden's laugh was bitter and short. Reasoned with? Child, you do not understand what we face. These are the descendants of the species that turned 3 entire star systems into graveyards rather than let them fall into enemy hands. They are the beings who fought a war against machine intelligences that lasted 2 centuries and ended with the complete destruction of their mechanical enemies. He activated a display showing ancient star charts. Red zones marked areas where nothing lived anymore. They are the species that, when faced with a plague that threatened to destroy all organic life in the galaxy, did not retreat to safety. They flew directly into the infected regions and systematically burned 14,000 worlds clean to stop the spread. And when it was over, they brought those dead worlds back to life. The chamber fell completely silent. These were not the actions of a species that valued individual lives over strategic goals. These were the actions of beings who would do anything necessary to survive and protect what they considered theirs. "What do they want?" whispered Delegate Voxara, her voice barely audible. Her answer came in a way that terrified everyone present. A transmission appeared on their screens without triggering any of their security systems. It had penetrated the most secure communication networks in the galaxy, as if they did not exist. The image showed a human male in what appeared to be military uniform. His bearing suggested both authority and casual confidence. "Honored representatives of the Galactic Council," he said. His words were automatically translated into every language present. "I am Admiral Jinwoo of the Terran Colonial Defense Force. I am speaking to you now from the bridge of the Unconquerable, currently in orbit around your homeworld, Hegemon Prime." Panic erupted throughout the chamber. Hegemon Prime was the most heavily defended world in the galaxy. It was surrounded by defensive networks that had never been breached, protected by early warning systems that extended for light years in every direction. The idea that a human fleet had approached undetected was impossible to believe. "Please remain calm," Admiral Jinwoo continued, as if he could see their reaction. "We are not here to conquer or destroy. We are here to establish boundaries and ensure that the mistakes of the past few days are not repeated." He paused, and his image seemed to look directly at each delegate. "Our terms are simple. The Galactic Council will formally recognize the sovereignty of all systems previously claimed by the Terran Empire. No military vessels will approach within 20 light-years of our borders without express permission. All research into human technology will cease immediately, and any existing samples or data will be turned over to our representatives." The Admiral's expression remained calm and professional. "In exchange, we will return your people and vessels unharmed, and we will withdraw to our borders. You will have peace, trade opportunities under controlled conditions, and the continued existence of your civilizations. However," he continued, and his voice took on a tone that carried unmistakable threat, "should you choose to test our resolve again, you will discover that the defense network that disabled your fleet represents approximately 0.001% of our actual military capability. We have been building, improving, and preparing for 4 centuries. We have technologies that your scientists could not comprehend if we spent decades explaining them. And we have had considerable time to become very, very good at warfare." The transmission paused, letting the implications sink in. 0.001%. If that tiny fraction could destroy an entire fleet, what could their full military do? "You have 24 hours to respond," Jinwoo concluded. "We will be monitoring all your communications, so please be honest in your deliberations. We prefer cooperation to the alternatives, but we are prepared for any choice you make." The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Finally, High Counselor Morden spoke, his voice carrying the weight of inevitable defeat. "The motion before the Council is simple. Do we accept the humans' terms, or do we face extinction as an organized galactic civilization?" The debate that followed was brief, Several delegates argued for resistance, claiming that no single species could dominate the entire galaxy. But their voices were drowned out by the practical reality of their situation. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that made resistance not just futile, but suicidal. When the vote came, it was unanimous. The Galactic Council would accept human terms. As the representatives filed out to carry the news to their respective governments, none of them noticed the small devices that had attached themselves to their vessels. Devices that would ensure the Terran Defense Force would know immediately if any of them decided to test humanity's resolve. The age of human dominance had not returned. Instead, something far more dangerous had emerged. The humans had become the galaxy's watchful guardians, and they were always listening. 3 months had passed since the Galactic Council accepted human terms. The galaxy was slowly learning to live with a new reality. Trade routes had been changed to go around Terran space. Diplomatic procedures had been rewritten to include humanity's return. The various species of the galaxy were beginning to understand their new place in the cosmic order, but not everything in the universe was happy with these changes. Deep in the void reaches, where space twisted in ways that hurt to think about, something stirred in the darkness between stars. The Devourers had been sleeping for thousands of years. Their last awakening had happened during the final days of the civilization that came before the current one. They were older than most suns, hungrier than black holes, and they had been dreaming of the day when the galaxy would again be rich with life and ready for feeding. The energy signatures from recent human activities had been like a dinner bell, ringing across the cosmic emptiness. Commander Yu Jin stood in the observation deck of the research station Pathfinder. He watched human science teams working alongside representatives from a dozen different species. The joint research program had been one of the better results of the recent crisis. It gave the galaxy's civilizations a chance to share knowledge and perhaps begin to trust each other. The quantum resonance patterns are fascinating, Dr. Alara of the Crystalline Confederacy was saying. Her translucent body shimmered with excitement. Your manipulation of space-time geometry is completely different from our methods, yet somehow more efficient. Dr. Jun Ho, the human physicist leading the project, nodded thoughtfully. We found that trying to force faster-than-light travel was ultimately self-defeating. The universe does not like to be pushed around. It responds much better to gentle persuasion. Is it true, asked research assistant Blicktar from the hegemony, that your people once traveled faster than light by convincing space itself that distance was just a suggestion? More or less, Junho replied with a smile. Though the technical details are somewhat more complex, the key insight was realizing that consciousness and physics are not separate things. They are different aspects of the same underlying reality. Their conversation was interrupted by an alarm that began sounding throughout the station. Commander Yujin immediately activated the communication system. All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. The main display showed sensor readings that made no sense. Massive objects were emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system. The objects registered as organic rather than mechanical, yet they showed energy signatures that were beyond anything in the known galaxy. Devourers, whispered Dr. Alara, her form suddenly dimming with terror. The ancient text spoke of them, world eaters from the dark between the stars. Yujin was already activating emergency protocols. All civilian vessels evacuate immediately, defense network, full activation, and get me a direct communication line to Earth Command, Priority Alpha. The creatures that came out of the void were nightmares made real. Each one was larger than a moon. Their bodies combined organic curves with crystalline structures that pulsed with evil energy. They moved through space like cosmic predators, and reality itself seemed to pull back from their presence. Commander, his tactical officer reported, the defense platforms are engaging, but their weapons are having minimal effect. These things are absorbing energy faster than we can deliver it. On the display, the automated defense systems that had so easily destroyed the hegemony fleet were being systematically eliminated. The Devourers did not even seem to notice the attacks. They simply consumed whatever energy was directed at them and continued their advance toward the populated worlds of the system. But then the real human fleet arrived. They came not through hyperspace but through folds in reality itself. They emerged from dimensions that most species could not even perceive. The ships were unlike anything that had been seen during the hegemony crisis. They were sleek constructions that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time, crude, by humans whose capabilities had been enhanced far beyond normal biology. Admiral Seo Jin's voice filled the command center. All civilian vessels withdraw to minimum safe distance. Research teams prepare to document everything. This is going to be educational. What followed was not a battle but a lesson. The human vessels moved in patterns that seemed almost like a dance. Their weapon systems targeted not the devourers' physical bodies but the quantum structures that held their consciousness together. Reality itself became their battleground, with the humans systematically unraveling the ancient entity's connection to normal space-time. How? Dr. Alara whispered, watching as creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for ages were methodically dismantled. How is this possible? Dr. Junho's earlier friendly manner was replaced by something harder and more focused. He answered without looking away from the display. 4 centuries ago, we encountered the devourers ourselves. They consumed 3 of our worlds before we found a way to stop them. He paused, his voice carrying the weight of ancient tragedy. We learned that some threats cannot be reasoned with, negotiated with, or contained. They can only be destroyed. But the energy required, we built it, Junho said simply. We spent 400 years developing technologies specifically designed to fight enemies that exist partially outside reality. We learned to manipulate consciousness itself as a weapon. We became something more than human because the alternative was extinction. As the last of the devourers dissolved into quantum static, Admiral Seo Jin's voice returned. Threat neutralized. Cleanup crews are en route to deal with the dimensional instabilities. Research teams, you will want to analyze the interaction patterns. This data will be invaluable for your own defensive preparations. Commander Yujin stared at the now peaceful display, trying to process what he had witnessed. Your people are not just more advanced than the rest of us. You are something else entirely. Dr. Junho's smile returned, but now it carried depths that had not been there before. We are what happens when a species faces extinction and refuses to accept it. We are what happens when necessity forces evolution beyond its normal limits. He looked directly at the commander. And we are what stands between the galaxy and the things that lurk in the spaces between the stars. As the research teams began analyzing the aftermath of the battle, one fact became clear to every non-human present. The humans had not just been hiding for 4 centuries. They had been preparing for threats that the rest of the galaxy could not even imagine. And now, whether they wanted it or not, the galaxy had guardians who were as dangerous as the things they protected against. The great assembly of Earth met in the vast chambers beneath the Himalayas. Humanity's greatest minds had gathered to debate their species' future. Representatives from every human world sat in circles around a central platform. Their faces showed the weight of decisions that would reshape the galaxy. Admiral Hyejin stood at the center. Her uniform bore the signs of the Terran Defense Force and decorations that spoke of centuries spent in the dark between stars. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had faced the void and returned stronger. The galaxy knows we exist now, she began. For 400 years we kept up the pretense that we had vanished, that we were nothing more than old ghost stories told around alien campfires. That illusion is gone. The assembled representatives listened in silence. These were the heirs to humanity's greatest experiment, a species that had chosen to step back from galactic dominance and instead prepare for threats that others could not understand. The question before us is simple, Hyejin continued. Do we maintain our isolation, or do we accept the responsibility that our capabilities have placed upon us? Director Chan Ho of the Colonial Development Corps rose from his seat. The other species fear us, but they also need us. The Devourer attack proved that there are threats in this galaxy that normal military force cannot handle. If we retreat again, who will stand against the next crisis? And if we engage, argued Dr. So Young from the Ethics Council, we risk becoming the very thing we retreated from 4 centuries ago. We risk becoming conquerors who justify their actions with noble intentions. The debate that followed lasted for hours. It touched on philosophy, military necessity, and the fundamental question of what humanity had become during its long isolation. Some argued for returning to the shadows. Others wanted limited engagement. Still others believed they should take an active leadership role in galactic affairs. Finally, High Chancellor Namwu rose to speak. He was the eldest of the assembled representatives. His voice carried the weight of centuries and the wisdom of a species that had been forced to confront its own nature. "My friends," he said, "we have spent 400 years learning to be something more than the aggressive expansionists our ancestors became. We have built technologies that can reshape reality itself. We have developed philosophies that integrate consciousness with physics. We have created military capabilities that can defeat entities from outside normal space-time." He paused, looking around the chamber at faces that represented humanity's greatest achievements and deepest fears. "But our greatest accomplishment has been learning restraint. Learning that power without wisdom is merely another form of destruction. The galaxy does not need rulers. It has had enough of those. What it needs are guardians. Protectors who act not for conquest or glory, but because someone must stand against the darkness." The vote, when it came, was closer than many expected, but the decision was clear. Humanity would emerge from its long isolation, not as conquerors or leaders, but as the galaxy's last line of defense against threats that existed beyond normal understanding. Months later, the Terran Expeditionary Corps established its first permanent base outside human space in over 4 centuries. The station, called Haven, was built where several major trade routes met. It served as both a diplomatic facility and a forward observation. Post Ambassador Kyung-mi had once been a colonial defense commander. Now she found herself explaining humanity to the galaxy's various species. Her office looked out over the station's central plaza, where humans worked alongside beings from dozens of different worlds. "Your people are not what we expected," said Ambassador Thilaran of the Merchant Coalition during one of their regular meetings. His expression was hard to read, but his tone suggested confusion rather than fear. "What did you expect?" Kyung-mi asked with genuine curiosity. "Conquerors, overlords, beings who would demand tribute and submission." The alien's voice carried uncertainty. "Instead, we find scientists, teachers, engineers, individuals who seem genuinely interested in cooperation rather than domination." Kyung-mi smiled. "400 years ago, you would have been right. We were aggressive, expansionist, convinced of our own superiority. It took facing extinction to teach us humility." She pointed toward the plaza below, where a human engineer was patiently explaining quantum mechanics to a group of young aliens. "We learned that the strongest civilizations are not those that conquer others, but those that help others become stronger." "And yet," Thilaran observed, "your military capabilities remain unmatched." The Devourer incident demonstrated powers that border on the divine. "Necessary powers," Kyung-mi replied. "There are things in this universe that cannot be reasoned with, bargained with, or appeased. Sometimes the only option is to be more dangerous than the danger itself." As their meeting ended and Thilaran left, Kyung-mi thought about humanity's strange journey. They had begun as explorers, become conquerors, retreated into isolation, and emerged as something new in galactic history. A species powerful enough to dominate, but wise enough to choose protection instead. In the months and years that followed, humanity's role in galactic affairs continued to evolve. They helped settle disputes between species that had been enemies for thousands of years. They shared technologies that improved life throughout the galaxy, while carefully keeping back those that could be weaponized. They built research facilities where the galaxy's greatest minds could work together on challenges that no single species could solve. But most importantly, they watched. In the dark spaces between stars, in the quantum foam that lay beneath reality, in dimensions that other species could not perceive, human vessels and sensors maintained their vigil. They watched for the return of old threats and the emergence of new ones. The galaxy had learned that humans were no longer the ghost stories their grandparents had whispered about in the dark. They were something far more significant. They were the guardians who stood between civilization and the abyss, ensuring that the light of consciousness would continue to burn in a universe that seemed determined to extinguish it. And in the deepest archives of human space, sealed records spoke of other threats, ancient entities that still slumbered in the void, cosmic predators that viewed entire galaxies as hunting grounds, phenomena that existed beyond the boundaries of normal physics. The galaxy might believe that humanity had revealed all its secrets, but the truth was simpler and more terrifying. What they had seen was only the beginning of what humans had become during their long years of preparation. Some ghost stories, after all, were never meant to be laid to rest.